The first scream was cut short by the wet snap of a blade tearing through flesh. Sergeant Alvarez spun around, rifle raised, sweat dripping into his eyes as the jungle canopy swallowed the moonlight. Shadows moved in the undergrowth, too fast, too silent. Then came the gunfire, short, disciplined bursts that shattered the illusion of safety. "Contact left side," Corporal Varga's voice cracked through the radio, but even as he shouted, a flash of light lit his face. A shot ripped into his shoulder, spinning him into the mud. The squad had landed less than 12 hours ago. Orders were simple: secure a perimeter, set up camp, and prepare for reconnaissance at dawn. Yet now, in the suffocating dark of the Amazon, what the old veterans called the Green Hell, their mission had already turned into a nightmare. Alvarez dropped beside Varga, dragging him behind a fallen log. His breath came shallow and ragged, eyes darting across the tree line. The jungle smelled of iron, cordite, and rotting leaves. Insects hummed like a dirge. "Stay with me, kid," Alvarez whispered, pressing down on the wound. Private Ramirez crouched nearby, his hands trembling as he tried to reload. He was barely 20, fresh out of training, and now his first combat tasted like blood and fear. His mind flickered back to his mother's last words before he boarded the plane: "Come back alive." He could not shake the image of her standing at the airport gate, the echo of her hand pressed against the glass. A flare hissed into the sky, painting the jungle in a hellish red glow. For one brief instant, the squad saw their attackers. Figures in camouflaged rags, faces smeared with mud, eyes cold with intent. They moved with precision, like predators who knew the terrain and the men they were hunting. "Fall back to the rally point," Alvarez barked, but even as he gave the order, a sinking weight pulled at his gut. Their position had been compromised too quickly, too precisely. Someone had given them away. Private Stone, the radio operator, fumbled with his pack. Static hissed through the handset. "No signal, jamming us." His voice cracked, panic rising. Alvarez clenched his jaw. He thought of the briefing back at base, an informant's intel, a promise of safe insertion, assurances of low resistance. Lies, he realized now. Someone had fed them into the teeth of an ambush. Bullets sliced through the air, splintering wood, sending shards into exposed skin. One round shattered the barrel of Ramirez's rifle. He froze, staring at the useless metal in his hands, and in that heartbeat of hesitation, he felt the hot wind of mortality brush past his cheek. "Move, damn it!" Alvarez shoved him forward, his own rifle spitting fire at the tree line. The jungle answered with silence, then another scream, this one unmistakably Sergeant O'Neill's. A man built like stone, fearless in every training exercise, now dragged into the dark by unseen hands. His cries choked off into a gurgle, then nothing. The men pressed tighter together, forming a ragged line. Every shadow looked like a muzzle. Every whisper of leaves sounded like death approaching. Varga coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "We're not supposed to make it out, are we?" he rasped, his eyes glassy with realization. Alvarez did not answer. He couldn't, because deep in his chest, beneath the adrenaline and fury, he knew Varga was right. Their mission was never survival. The jungle closed in around them, the air heavy, pressing like the weight of 1,000 secrets. And in that suffocating night, every man in the squad felt the same truth claw at their thoughts. They had been betrayed before their boots even touched the soil. The gunfire dwindled into stuttering bursts, then into an oppressive silence that settled over the camp like a heavy shroud. The men crouched low, hearts pounding so loud they feared it might give them away. Steam rose from the mud, carrying with it the acrid sting of burnt powder and the earthy rot of the jungle. Somewhere far off, a bird shrieked once, then went still, as if even nature was holding its breath. Alvarez's fingers twitched against the trigger guard of his rifle. He strained his ears, listening for movement, for anything that might hint at where the attackers had gone. But the jungle had swallowed them whole, leaving nothing but darkness and the phantom echo of violence. "Ramirez, sitrep," Alvarez whispered. His voice was calm, but his eyes flicked restlessly over every shadow. Ramirez swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Stone's alive. Varga's hit bad. O'Neill's," he trailed off, jaw tightening, unable to finish. The silence that followed said enough. Private Stone shook his radio in frustration, the static whining through the headset. Still nothing. I swear they're blanketing the whole sector. Whoever they are, they came ready. His hands trembled, though he tried to hide it by adjusting his helmet strap. Alvarez's teeth ground together. He'd seen ambushes before, hasty traps laid by desperate fighters. This was not that. This was surgical, precise. Someone had known their insertion point, their timeline, their equipment loadout. This was no coincidence. "Sergeant," Ramirez whispered, "you think someone sold us out?" Alvarez met his gaze, the red flare still burning faintly in the sky reflected in his eyes. He didn't answer immediately. In his chest, an old bitterness stirred, the memory of other jungles, other missions where men bled for promises made in air-conditioned rooms far away. He wanted to lie, to tell Ramirez it was just bad luck, but luck didn't feel like this. "We move," Alvarez said at last. "Southwest, away from the LZ. Stick to cover, no lights, no noise. We'll find higher ground, get comms out, and regroup." Stone frowned. "What if they're hurting us?" "They are," Alvarez admitted, "but I'll be damned if we sit here waiting to die." They lifted Varga as carefully as they could, each step sinking into the sucking mud. His blood left a thin trail behind them, dark against the wet earth. Ramirez tried to wipe it with a palm frond, but Alvarez stopped him with a shake of the head. "Waste of time. They already know where we are." The jungle pressed close, suffocating. Vines brushed their faces like fingers, leaves whispered against their uniforms. Every sound was magnified. The click of a rifle safety, the groan of leather straps, the wet cough of a dying man. Minutes stretched into hours. The moon hid itself behind thick clouds, forcing them to move by feel more than sight. Sweat strung their eyes, mixed with grime, smeared into black masks across their faces. Finally, they stumbled into a small clearing where moonlight filtered through a break in the canopy. Alvarez raised a hand, halting the squad. They lowered Varga onto a bed of moss, his breath shallow, rattling in his chest. His hand clutched Alvarez's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't let them take me," he rasped. His eyes burned with a fear Alvarez had never seen in him before. Alvarez nodded, the promise heavy. "You're not going anywhere, soldier. Stay with us." Ramirez busied himself with the medical kit, though his shaking hands fumbled the gauze. He'd never patched a wound like this before. Alvarez took over, working quickly, binding the shoulder as best he could. The wound still bled through, dark and relentless. "Sergeant," Stone whispered, scanning the tree line, "why haven't they finished us off? They had us pinned." Alvarez didn't look up. "Because they don't want us dead, not yet." The words hung in the night, air like a curse. Then came the sound, soft at first, like wind through branches, but growing closer, heavier. Footsteps, many of them, surrounding the clearing. Alvarez raised his fist. The squad froze, weapons ready, hearts thundered. Ramirez bit down on his lip until it bled. Stone's eyes darted wildly, calculating angles of fire, lines of retreat. A voice broke the night, calm, cold, male, speaking perfect English. "You should have stayed on the beach, Sergeant." The squad stiffened. The voice carried authority, amusement, and something worse, intimate knowledge. Whoever this was, he knew Alvarez. Alvarez's jaw tightened. "Show yourself." A shadow detached from the tree line. A tall figure, face hidden under a hood of leaves and mud. Maury shapes emerged behind him, ghost-like, rifles steady. Their eyes gleamed faintly in the moonlight. The hooded man stepped forward, and Alvarez's stomach twisted. Recognition flashed in his mind, unbidden, undeniable. It was someone he thought he'd left behind years ago, someone who should not have been here. And in that moment, Alvarez understood the truth. This ambush wasn't just betrayal, it was personal. Alvarez gripped his rifle tighter, though he knew pulling the trigger now would only hasten their deaths. The figure stepped closer, each stride deliberate, boots barely making a sound on the damp earth. When the man lowered his hood, the flare of moonlight revealed a scar that ran from his temple to the corner of his mouth, an old wound Alvarez remembered giving. "Morales," Alvarez muttered, his voice like gravel. Ramirez's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. You know him." Alvarez didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Morales smirked, the scar twisting into something grotesque. "Still alive, Sarge. I knew you. Claw your way out of every hellhole they threw you in. You always were too stubborn to die." His tone carried venom, but also something colder, a satisfaction that curdled the air. Stone leveled his rifle. "Who the hell are you?" "An old friend," Morales said smoothly. "Older enemy, depending on the night." He tilted his head, studying Alvarez. "I warned them you'd be trouble, but they didn't listen, so here we are." The men behind him, phantoms with rifles, shifted their weight, their discipline unnerving. They weren't bandits. They weren't militia. These were professionals, trained and honed. Alvarez could feel it in their silence, in the way they moved as one organism. Ramirez's voice cracked. Why us? We just got here." Morales chuckled, low and bitter. "That's the point, kid. You were never meant to last the night." He glanced at Varga, bleeding out in the moss, and shook his head. "Orders were clear. Drop them in, pin them down, and make an example. Except," his eyes returned to Alvarez. "Except for him, he was mine." Alvarez felt a ghost of an old battlefield rise up around him. Years back, another jungle, another mission gone to rot. Morales had been left behind, swallowed by chaos when extraction came too soon. Command wrote him off as KIA. Alvarez had believed it until now. "You sold them out," Alvarez said, voice heavy with fury and disbelief. "No," Morales corrected, his smirk widening. "I sold you out. They're just collateral. Wrong place, wrong orders, wrong night." A shot cracked through the clearing before Alvarez could answer. Stone fired, the round sparking off the trunk inches from Morales' head. The jungle erupted. Figures poured forward like shadows breaking loose. Gunfire stuttered in the darkness. The squad scattered into defensive positions, instinct carrying them where hope could not. Alvarez dragged Ramirez behind a fallen tree, bullets chewing bark into splinters around them. "Keep your head down." But Stone was already gone. The last glimpse Alvarez caught was his silhouette framed by muzzle flashes, holding the line in a blaze of desperate courage. Then the line collapsed, and Stone's body jerked violently before crumpling to the ground. Ramirez's breath hitched, panic rising. "We can't win this. There's too many." Alvarez grabbed his collar, forcing him to look into his eyes. "We're not here to win. We are here to survive." Varga groaned, half-conscious, blood soaking through the bandages. Alvarez's mind raced. Morales wanted him alive. That meant there was still leverage to be found. A grenade clinked near the log. Without thinking, Alvarez shoved Ramirez flat and rolled, the explosion ripping through the clearing. Heat seared his back, the blast lifting dirt and leaves into the air. His ears rang, the world muffled, like sound trapped underwater. Through the haze, he saw Morales standing calmly, untouched, watching him. That smile never wavered. Alvarez crawled back toward Ramirez, dragging him by the vest. His lungs burned, his skin strung, but adrenaline kept him moving. He had one thought, one mission left now: get his men out, no matter the cost. "Sergeant," Ramirez whispered, blood on his lips, "we're not going to make it." Alvarez ignored him. He forced himself to believe in a lie strong enough to keep them moving. Above the tree line, another flare burst, bathing the jungle in ghostly white light. For an instant, Alvarez saw the impossible, figures not just around them, but ahead, forming a wall of rifles and eyes. The jungle itself seemed to turn hostile, the green hell swallowing every chance of escape. Morales' voice cut through the ringing in Alvarez's ears. "Run if you want, Sarge. I'll find you, I always do." Alvarez's heart pounded, not from fear, but from fury. He had led men into an ambush. He had walked them straight into betrayal, and now every step forward would be carved out of blood. The jungle whispered around him, alive with unseen hunters. The green hell had them now, and it would not let go. Alvarez forced himself to breathe slow, steady, though every instinct screamed to break and run. The jungle pressed tight, a living cage of vines and shadows. Morales' men fanned out with the patience of predators, rifles low, eyes gleaming with a cruel certainty. He glanced at Ramirez, wide-eyed, chest heaving, fingers clawed into the mud. At Varga, barely conscious, his blood leaving dark blossoms on the moss. At the bodies they'd already lost, swallowed by the night. His squad was unraveling, thread by thread. But he was still here, and as long as he drew breath, they weren't finished. Ramirez, Alvarez whispered, pulling a smoke grenade from his vest. On my signal, grab Varga and move south. Don't stop for anything. Ramirez shook his head furiously. You'll never. Do it, Alvarez's tone cut like steel. You're a soldier, you follow orders. Ramirez's throat bobbed. His hands trembled as he nodded. Alvarez pulled the pin. Smoke hissed, billowing thick white tendrils that crawled outward, devouring moonlight. Gunfire cracked, muffled inside the haze. The jungle erupted again, shouts and curses in languages Ramirez didn't understand. Go, Alvarez shoved him forward. Ramirez scrambled to Varga, hoisting the wounded man with desperate strength, dragging him into the suffocating smoke. Alvarez rose into a crouch, rifle shouldered, sending controlled bursts toward muzzle flashes. He moved sideways, drawing the predator's attention, carving himself into the role of bait. Through the shifting fog, Moral's silhouette appeared, unmoving, like a phantom immune to chaos. His voice was steady, a knife cutting through smoke. You always did love the hero act, Sarge. Alvarez fired 3 sharp shots. Morales vanished back into shadow, untouched. Something slammed into Alvarez's side, a round grazing through his vest, hot fire tearing across his ribs. He staggered, teeth clenched, refusing to cry out. Pain could wait, death could wait. He had men to buy time for. Ramirez stumbled ahead, dragging Varga's limp form. Branches lashed his face, mud sucked at his boots, but he didn't stop. The jungle screamed with gunfire behind him. Each step felt like betrayal, like leaving Alvarez to die, but orders were orders. Almost there, Ramirez muttered, half to himself, half to Varga. Just hold on, just. A shadow burst from the undergrowth, knife flashing. Ramirez yanked his sidearm, firing point blank. The figure dropped, thrashing once before the jungle swallowed him. Ramirez gagged at the blood spraying across his face, but kept moving. Behind them, Alvarez ducked behind a tree, pressing his hand against his wound. His breath came ragged, the world tilting, but his eyes never left the tree line. He counted shadows, listened for footsteps, plotted every bullet left in his magazine. Moral's voice came again, closer now. You should have left me, Alvarez. You should have let me die back then. Now your men die because you couldn't. Alvarez growled low in his throat. You wanted vengeance? Fine, come take it. The smoke thinned, figures closed in, rifles raised. Alvarez gripped his weapon tighter, ready to unleash his last stand. His vision blurred, the edges of the world darkening, but his will held. If this was where it ended, he would make the jungle remember. And then, a burst of light. Not a flare, not gunfire, something else. The tree line ahead exploded in fire as a hidden charge ripped through Moral's flank. Men screamed, torn apart by steel and flame. Confusion splintered their ranks. Alvarez's eyes widened, not ours, someone else. From the chaos, a new volley of gunfire erupted, clean, disciplined, deadly. Shadows fell. The jungle itself seemed to split open, another force striking from the dark. Ramirez, panting, dragging Varga, froze as figures emerged ahead. Unknown soldiers, faces masked, weapons unfamiliar. Not Moral's men, not theirs, something in between. One of them raised a gloved hand. No words, just a gesture. Ramirez tightened his grip on Varga, torn between relief and terror. Behind them, Alvarez dropped to one knee, pain stealing his strength. He looked at the new arrivals through the smoke and chaos, suspicion sharpening through the haze of blood loss. Whoever they weren't here to save them. No, this was something bigger. The green hell wasn't just a jungle. It was a battlefield carved by secrets, and tonight they'd stumbled into the heart of it. The clearing burned with smoke and gunfire. Moral's men shouted in confusion, their neat formation broken apart by the sudden ambush from the shadows. The masked newcomers advanced with precision, silent, merciless, every shot clean. Alvarez used the chaos, staggering toward the cover of a massive kapok tree, pressing his hand against the wound at his ribs. Ramirez, half dragging Varga, felt the earth tremble beneath his boots as another explosion lit the night. His breath hitched, the weight of Varga nearly pulling him down, but he forced himself onward. Each step was a prayer whispered through gritted teeth. Then an outstretched hand. One of the masked figures appeared in front of him, motionless, weapon lowered but ready. Ramirez froze, his grip tightening on his sidearm. He couldn't see the stranger's eyes, only the reflection of moonlight on the visor. "Keep moving," the figure said, voice muffled through a modulator, gender indiscernible. The words were English, but clipped, neutral, devoid of allegiance. "Who the hell are you?" Ramirez rasped, his chest heaving. The stranger tilted their head slightly, as if the question was irrelevant. "Survivors follow or die here." Ramirez hesitated, instincts torn between trust and terror. Varga groaned in his arms, blood soaking Ramirez's fatigues. He had no choice. Gritting his teeth, he nodded and staggered after the masked figures as they melted back into the jungle. Alvarez forced himself upright, using his rifle as a crutch. He spotted Morales through the smoke, still alive, rallying his men with a snarl. Their eyes locked across the chaos, two ghosts from the same war now set on a collision course. Morales pointed at Alvarez, his voice rising above the cacophony. "Alive, I want him alive." Bullets tore into the kapok tree, bark exploding into shards around Alvarez's head. He fired back in short bursts, buying himself slivers of time. He felt the blood soaking into his vest, warm and heavy, but he refused to yield. "Move," one of the masked strangers barked, appearing at his side. Strong hands grabbed his arm, dragging him away from the hail of fire. Alvarez resisted for half a second, instinct screaming against being handled, but the stranger's grip was unyielding. They pulled him into the undergrowth, where Ramirez and Varga already stumbled forward, swallowed by vines and shadows. Behind them, Morales' voice thundered, filled with rage. "You can't run from me, Alvarez. This jungle belongs to me." The words chased them as they fled, echoing through the dense canopy like a curse. For what felt like hours, they moved under the guidance of their masked escorts. The jungle seemed to part for them, paths appearing where none existed, as if they had walked these grounds 100 times before. The squad, bloodied and broken, followed blindly, too exhausted to question. At last, they reached a narrow ravine where a river churned below, the water black and violent. The masked leader raised a hand, and ropes already waited, staked into the earth. Efficient, prepared. Alvarez leaned against a rock, chest heaving. "Who are you?" His voice was hoarse, scraped raw by smoke and blood. The leader crouched in front of him, visor reflecting his face like a distorted mirror. "Not your enemy, not yet." "That doesn't answer my questions. Waste time. Morales is hunting you, and if you stay in this jungle without us, you're already dead." Ramirez swallowed hard, his arms trembling as he tried to keep Varga conscious. "Why help us?" For a moment, silence. The jungle hissed with insects and distant echoes of pursuit. Finally, the leader said, "Because what's coming for you is bigger than Morales, bigger than betrayal, and if you want to survive the green hell, you'll need to know who's really pulling the strings." Alvarez narrowed his eyes. His instincts screamed against trust, but the truth was simple. They had no other path. The jungle offered only death. These strangers, for now, offered survival. The leader stood, motioning toward the ropes. "Move, we're not safe here." Ramirez looked to Alvarez, waiting for the order. Alvarez hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. "Do it." One by one, they crossed the ravine, the roar of the river swallowing their fear. On the far side, the jungle closed in again, thick and endless. The masked figures led the way, silent as wraiths. Behind them, far in the distance, Morales stood in the smoke of the ruined clearing. His scarred face twisted into a smile that was not human. He had lost the squad, for now, but he had found something better, a hunt worth savoring. And in that endless jungle, under the choking canopy of the green hell, Alvarez felt the first tremor of a truth he did not yet understand. They were not soldiers on a mission anymore. They were pawns in a game that had started long before their boots touched the soil. The jungle swallowed them whole again, silence closing in like a predator. Every step deeper into the undergrowth was a battle, roots clawing at their boots, vines pulling at their gear, branches whipping across their faces. Alvarez forced himself to stay upright, though each breath cut like glass through his ribs. Ramirez stumbled behind him, dragging Varga's half-limp body, whispering his name over and over like a prayer to keep him alive. The masked soldiers moved with inhuman ease. Not a twig snapped under their boots, not a branch slowed their passage. Alvarez noticed how they never raised their rifles unnecessarily, how they stopped at every clearing to scan the canopy before signaling forward. Whoever they were not improvising. This was their territory. Alvarez's instincts burned. Rescued or captured, saved or trapped, the line blurred with every step. Finally, after what felt like hours, the undergrowth thinned. The squad emerged into a hollow beneath a curtain of vines. Hidden from above, the place seemed carved deliberately out of the jungle. Shapes loomed in the dark, tents made of camouflaged fabric, crates stacked in neat rows, equipment that was too advanced for guerrilla camps, yet too crude for official supply drops. Ramirez blinked in disbelief. What is this place? The leader of the masked soldiers finally pulled their visor free. A woman's face, sharp features weathered by years of command, eyes like shards of obsidian. She had the kind of presence that didn't need rank insignia. Every movement spoke of authority. This, she said evenly, is what's left when men like Morales burn villages, when governments deny operations, when soldiers are written off as expendable. We are what survives. Alvarez studied her, searching for deception. Her eyes didn't waver. Name, he demanded, his voice iron despite the blood soaking his side. She didn't hesitate. Call me Kessler. Kessler, Ramirez echoed, almost spitting the syllables. Who are you people? Kessler's lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. We are ghosts, survivors of wars that were never supposed to exist, soldiers left behind like Morales. She leaned closer, her gaze burning into Alvarez. The difference is, we didn't break, we adapted. The words struck Alvarez harder than the bullet wound. Morales' survival suddenly had context. He wasn't an outlier, he was part of something larger, something festering in the shadows of every forgotten conflict. Kessler turned her attention to Ramirez, who was still clinging to Varga. Your man won't last without treatment. Ramirez's eyes pleaded, you can help him. Kessler nodded once. We have medics, supplies, but understand help comes with a price. Nothing in this jungle is free. Alvarez felt the trap close like jaws. They were too deep now, too broken to walk away. If he refused, Varga died. If he agreed, they became bound to whatever shadow war Kessler commanded. Do it, Alvarez said finally, voice low. Kessler snapped her fingers, and two masked soldiers stepped forward, lifting Varga onto a stretcher with practiced care. Ramirez moved to follow, but Alvarez caught his arm. Stay sharp. Don't trust what you can't see. Hours blurred into a haze of treatment and restless waiting. Varga was taken into a tent, his moans swallowed by canvas walls. Ramirez paced like a caged animal, while Alvarez sat against a crate, forcing himself to stay awake despite the pain clawing through him. Kessler approached once the camp quieted. She crouched in front of him, eyes sharp in the flickering lantern light. You understand now, don't you? Morales isn't just some bitter soldier turned warlord. He's ours, or he was. Alvarez's eyes narrowed. Yours. He was part of us, Kessler said, her tone matter of fact. But Morales chose vengeance over purpose. He wants to burn everything, us, you, anyone who stands in his way. He'll keep hunting you until this jungle drinks your bones. Alvarez leaned forward, blood on his lips as he spoke. Then why save us? Kessler's answer was cold, precise. Because Morales is a problem too big for us alone. You want survival. We want Morales stopped. For both our sakes, your squad now belongs to this jungle's war. Alvarez let the words settle, heavy as the humidity pressing down on them. Betrayal, ambush, survival, none of it had been random. They were pieces on a board, pushed by hands they couldn't yet see. Outside the tent, the jungle whispered with unseen life. Every rustle of leaves, every cry of a night bird carried the weight of unseen watchers. Ramirez finally spoke, his voice thin, almost breaking. "Sergeant, what do we do now?" Alvarez stared into the dark, his jaw tight. The truth clawed at him. There was no going back, no extraction waiting beyond the trees. The green hell had swallowed them whole, and the only way out was through blood. He looked at Ramirez, then toward the tent where Varga fought for breath. His decision came like a blade drawn in silence. "We play their game," Alvarez said, "until we can break it." Kessler's shadow shifted, her eyes glinting in the lantern glow. She said nothing, just watched, like a hunter waiting for her prey to take its first step into the snare. And in the heart of the jungle, Moral's voice echoed still, carried by the night air like a vow. "You can't run from me, Alvarez. This jungle belongs to me." The night seemed endless. The jungle never truly slept. It hissed, chirped, and screamed with unseen life. But for Alvarez and his broken squad, time dissolved into a blur of blood, smoke, and suffocating humidity. Every breath they drew felt stolen, every heartbeat a countdown. Ramirez sat near the tent flap where Varga was being treated. His face glistened with sweat, streaked with mud, his eyes locked on the swaying canvas. Each muffled groan from inside tore at him. He pressed his palms together, lips moving silently. Prayer or desperation, Alvarez couldn't tell. Alvarez sat on a crate a few paces away, the glow of a lantern painting harsh shadows across his face. He pressed a rag to his ribs, feeling the slow seep of blood beneath. He ignored the pain, focusing instead on the sounds around them. The low murmur of Kessler's masked soldiers, the metallic clink of weapons being cleaned, the faint rustle of movement just beyond the perimeter. The jungle had ears, and it was always listening. "Sergeant," Ramirez whispered suddenly, his voice cracking. "Why us? Why the hell drop us into this? We are nobodies." Alvarez didn't look at him at first. He took his time, finishing the knot on his bandage before finally lifting his gaze. His eyes were flat, hard, the eyes of a man who had already buried too many ghosts. "That's exactly why," Alvarez said, "because nobodies don't get remembered. Nobody asks questions when nobodies don't come home." Ramirez stared at him, his throat bobbing. "So we were expendable." The word hung heavy, like a noose in the air. From the shadows, Kessler approached. She stripped off her gloves, her hands scarred, fingers calloused. She carried a canteen, which she set on the crate beside Alvarez. "You've already figured it out," she said, her tone almost approving. "They sent you here to disappear, just like they tried with us. Alvarez didn't flinch, and you survived." Kessler's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Survival is a matter of refusing to die. Morales understands that better than anyone. Unfortunately, he learned the wrong lessons." Her words carried weight, but Alvarez caught the flicker in her eyes. The kind of pain you bury so deep it becomes part of you. He recognized it because he carried the same look. "Why him?" Ramirez asked suddenly. His voice was small, almost childlike. "Why's Morales after us? He doesn't even know us." Kessler crouched down, resting her arms on her knees. "It's not about you, it's about him." She turned her eyes to Alvarez. "It always was." Ramirez's gaze darted between them, confusion and fear swirling. Alvarez said nothing. His jaw worked, but no words came. Inside the tent, Varga let out a strangled cry. Ramirez shot to his feet, but Kessler raised a hand. "He's alive. For now, my medic is good, but don't expect miracles." Ramirez's eyes glistened. He sank back down, rubbing his mud-streaked face with trembling hands. "We should have never come here. I should have." "Stop," Alvarez's voice was low, cutting, but not cruel. "Don't, that's poison. You think what you could have done different, you won't last the week." The jungle answered him with a chorus of night insects. It was almost mocking, as if the green hell itself was whispering, "You won't last anyway." Alvarez leaned back against the crate, closing his eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind his lids, Moral's face appeared scarred, grinning, eyes alight with vengeance. He remembered the last time he saw Morales years ago, in another jungle, on another doomed mission. Morales screaming into the radio for extraction, Alvarez dragging 2 wounded men to the chopper, the pilot shouting they were overweight, Morales stumbling, left behind as the rotors cut him off from salvation. Alvarez had convinced himself Morales died there, easier than living with the alternative. Now the alternative had returned. Kessler's voice broke the silence. He'll come again, he doesn't stop, not until he's burned everything you care about. You've seen what he does. Ramirez's hands curled into fists. Then let's hit him first, we've still got fight left. Alvarez studied the kid, so much fear in his eyes, but beneath it, a spark, a dangerous spark, the kind that made men brave enough to charge into machine gun fire if you told them it mattered. Brave, but not ready. You don't get it, Alvarez said, his voice grim. This isn't just a fight. Morales has numbers, territory. He's been shaping this jungle into his weapon. Out here, every shadow belongs to him. Kessler nodded in agreement. And every man you saw with him tonight, that was just a taste. He's building an army of the abandoned. He takes the ones left behind and twists them, gives them purpose, even if it's only hate. Ramirez's voice cracked. And you expect us to fight that? No, Kessler said softly, her eyes never leaving Alvarez. I expect him to. Alvarez's jaw tightened. He said nothing. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant roar of the river and the endless drone of insects. Then, from inside the tent, the medic stepped out. His mask was off, revealing a gaunt face, eyes tired but steady. He's stable, the medic reported, but weak. Infection's the real threat now. He'll need rest and antibiotics we don't have much of. Ramirez exhaled in shaky relief, his shoulders slumping. Alvarez gave a short nod, masking the flicker of hope in his chest. Kessler rose to her full height. You'll stay here tonight, rest. Tomorrow we move. Morales won't stop hunting, and neither will the jungle. She turned to leave, but Alvarez called after her. And where exactly are you taking us? Kessler paused, half-turned. Her eyes glinted in the lantern light, unreadable. To the only place in this green hell where Morales doesn't dare follow. Yet. She left them with that, her silhouette dissolving into the darkness like she belonged more to shadow than flesh. Ramirez slumped against the dirt, exhaustion finally winning. His eyelids fluttered shut even as he tried to fight it. Alvarez stayed awake, staring into the dark, listening to the jungle's breathing. Somewhere out there, Morales was moving, hunting, waiting. Alvarez whispered to himself, so soft Ramirez couldn't hear. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The jungle answered with silence. But Alvarez knew the truth. Silence in the green hell was never peace. It was only the pause before the next scream.